Are you ready for debate night at Politicon 2017? All right. Well, let's bring them out, the people you've been waiting for. First, Editor-in-Chief of the Daily Wire and host of the Ben Shapiro. Of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur. All right. If you guys could be a little more excited, that'd be great. All right, well, we're here to debate the future of the political parties. And let me just say quickly one thing about the format. I'm going to pose questions to both of our speakers here. We'll have a response. We can have a re-response. We can go back and forth a few times. When we've gone far enough, then I will step in. I might ask a follow-up question, or I might switch the topic. So, are we ready to go, guys? All right, well, let's start with one of the topics in the news today, and that's healthcare. And I'm going to start with Ben. Are you proud or disappointed in establishment GOP figures like John McCain, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins for their vote on healthcare?
So, I'm wildly disappointed with the entire party. The fact is that we were promised a full repeal of Obamacare. They did not even attempt to pursue a full repeal of Obamacare. And the fact of the matter is that there's a significant gap inside the Republican Party about whether this should even happen or not. There are people who believe that the Obamacare regulations are an affirmative good. There was an attempt to basically leave all the Obamacare regulations in place and just remove the funding mechanism, which would have led to the exacerbation of the death spiral. The truth about healthcare is this. There are three qualities of healthcare that you can have. You can have affordability, you can have universality, or you can have quality. And you can have two of those three things, but not all three. Right? You can have universality, affordability, or quality. Two of those three things you can have. And one of the things that's happened with Obamacare is that you've gotten closer to universality, but you haven't gotten any closer to either affordability or quality. And the Republican Party seems to be falling into the trap of basically just copying what the Democrats do, except being worse at it. What they actually need to do is relieve the regulatory burden that is driving up the cost of healthcare, and they need to stop acting as though insurance companies' jobs is actually just to reimburse people for their bad health. If you join up with an insurance company and your health sucks to begin with, you're going to pay more because it's an insurance company, not a charity. That doesn't mean that we can't... Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have some form of backup for people who have pre-existing conditions. I would hope that the social fabric would help fill that in. This is why I'm a big believer in charity and churches and synagogues filling that gap. But what we can't do is suggest, as the Bernie Sanders left does, that healthcare is an inalienable right, and therefore you can put a gun to my wife's head, she's a doctor, and you can force her to provide care at any cost you want to pay. You can't do that and hope to increase the supply of healthcare. Health insurance is not healthcare. They're not the same thing. And anybody who tells you differently is lying or trying to sell you something.
Cenk, your take on the healthcare vote.
Great. Before I do that, first of all, welcome to the Thunderdome.
Wait till he does something. I mean,
in all seriousness, the reason that I kid around about that is that I really want to make sure that Ben's opinions are heard and my opinions are heard, and that this is an exchange of ideas. And believe it or not, there are some things that we do agree on, but we won't be discussing those tonight. So on the issue of healthcare, let's get going. So the Democratic Party is incredibly proud that they defeated a bill that had 17% approval rating. It's a low bar. And I'm glad they held. The Republicans have a comical position, which is that why didn't the Democrats help us defeat Obamacare? Well, that's kind of because that was their idea. And why in God's green earth would they help you defeat their own plan? Now, is Obamacare enough? Not nearly. And there are a number of issues that we had as progressives with it, including lack of price controls. You left it in the hands of private insurance, and of course, them being corporations, which Ben kind of alluded to there, they're going to want to make money. And so that is very, very normal. And so I don't think that that was the right way to approach it, and it was originally a Heritage Foundation plan to begin with. So I believe that the right approach, and the one that Democrats should pursue next, although they probably won't, is Medicare for all. Real quick, let me explain why. Medicare polls a 77% and actually accomplishes the three things that Ben talked about. It's universal coverage, it is affordable, and actually gives you good insurance. That's why it polls at 77%. And Medicare for all now polling at 60%. Federally funded health insurance for everybody polling at 61%. So I tell my Democratic friends, you might want to try something that's popular for a change. So, and finally, like on the idea that, hey, listen, everybody can't get health care. Well, this is not like furniture, which sometimes you allude to, Ben. Look, you can have good furniture, bad furniture, I've had it all, right? That's optional. If you don't have good health care, you die. And so I view it as not something that capitalism should deal with, and I believe in capitalism, and I think they make great sneakers, but something that is about equality of opportunity. And you cannot have equality of opportunity if you're dead. So Medicare for all.
So a couple of notes in response to the Medicare for all shtick. So this is Bernie Sanders shtick, obviously. The problem with Medicare for all is that when people say that it's affordable, this isn't affordable to the person who has the Medicare. It is not affordable to the country. In fact, it's so unaffordable to the country that the state of California was a nut job leftist state, just refused to even pass Medicare for all because it would have immediately doubled the debt. As far as the idea that Medicare, that medical care is a right, but it's not actually a good or a service, this is a way to make things less plentiful. If you declare things right, but you don't actually incentivize the creation of those things, you don't get more of them. So the South African Constitution has right in there that healthcare is a right, that housing is a right. The fact is that you don't have good housing or healthcare in South Africa, because just declaring things rights does not make them appear. What makes more things appear is a market-based system that creates more doctors, that creates more medical care, that creates more incentive for people to join up. So my wife is a doctor. That means she has to go through 1,000 years of medical training, and we have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to make her a doctor. The idea that you're going to have the government come in and then dictate the sort of care that she should provide to each particular patient, and then dictate how much she should be paid for that care, is going to lead to a decrease in the number of people who are going into the medical industry, which decreases the level of care overall. This is why I say that it is better to treat things as goods than as rights, because declaring something a right just means that you have the right to steal it from me. But declaring something a good means that you get a market process that leads to lower prices and better care over time. And the big problem we've had before Obamacare is that it was already treated quasi as a right. You had it heavily regulated on the state level. It is continually heavily regulated. The idea there's a completely unregulated market is absolute nonsense. The reason you have employer-based health insurance in the first place was as a response to wage and price controls placed in the aftermath of World War II. And employers began giving health insurance as an actual good, right? They gave it as an actual incentive to their employees. If you had an actual individual-based health insurance market, you bought it just like you bought your car insurance, you would see more and better health care for everyone.
So, Ben, I don't want to steal health insurance from you. I want you to be healthy. That's why I want Medicare for all.
Just want to take my money and my wife's services.
So, you know, Republicans frame taxes as stealing. That's preposterous. So, if we don't have taxes, well, we can't do all the things that we want to do as a community. Now, there are some things that we just talked about that we don't want to do as a community, we want to do as individuals. In fact, the things that we want to do as individuals are much greater. That's why we're a mixed economy, but largely capitalist, and I agree with that. And I run a small business myself, getting larger every day. So, but there are some things that the government should do. They should do the military, cops, roads, bridges, and yes, education and healthcare. That's because, you know, conservatives seem a little confused about how healthcare works. Paul Ryan had a whole press conference about this. Ben a little bit alluded to it there. They're like, oh my God, it turns out the healthy subsidize the sick. Yeah, that's insurance. That's how it works. It's like the people with that are not getting into accidents are subsidizing the accidents. Yes, that's car insurance. That's how insurance works. And yes, taxes work in that we all decide we're going to do X, but we're not going to do Y. And I think it is fair for society to say that yes, we are going to do health care for everybody. Everybody. We're not going to leave 20 million people uninsured. We're not going to leave 30 million people uninsured. That's not what we do in a civilized society. And from time to time, the attack against Medicare, they say, oh, it's an entitlement. Yeah, we paid for it through payroll taxes our whole lives. You're goddamn right we're entitled to it, because we paid for it. We paid for it. And so when you take out the middlemen of the insurance companies that put their profits in there, that put their marketing in there, that put their lobbyist money in there, that means more savings for Americans. And so finally, you know, the idea that it can't be done is preposterous, since every other Western developed country does some version of single payer. It obviously can be done, and it is done at lower rates and better coverage.
Well, let me add something to this question, and you can respond to it if you want to, but Cenk referenced Paul Ryan. When the Republicans took control of Congress, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, famously said, we need to switch from being an opposition party to being a proposition party. So what's your evaluation, Ben, of their efforts in that direction to unite the party and move legislation forward?
I mean, we all have eyes, they suck at it. I mean, and Paul Ryan is not exactly my go-to guy when it comes to political acumen and genius. So I more want to respond to some of the contentions that Cenk was making about Medicare for all and single-payer healthcare. A couple of things. One, when you say we pay for it, that's not technically true. The idea that everybody who's paying into Medicaid paid for it and now they get out what they paid in is obviously not true. It is a redistributive program, and to pretend otherwise is just silly. The people who are paying the payroll taxes are not the people who are taking out through Medicaid. Obviously.
Can I just address that super quick? So if we're talking about Medicare, right? Not Medicaid.
Right.
So in Medicare, so you're both correct and incorrect. So it's not like I put in $20 and I get $20 back. That part is true. Right. But we all pay into Medicare together, and then we all get it when we are sick.
So can I ask you a question? I have two questions, really serious questions. One, what is your ideal tax rate? Because it's going to cost a lot of money for a lot of this stuff. And two, what is your ideal level of medical care? Because the fact is that we can spend millions of dollars on people at end-of-life care. We can spend millions of dollars on surgeries and preventative care. I mean, healthcare is an expensive business, even under a single-payer system, which is why generally you end up with rationing. So, what is your ideal level of healthcare that is provided to everyone, and what sort of tax rate are you proposing to subsidize that?
Yeah, so those are very, very fair questions. So let's talk about taxes for a second. So conservatives agree or say all the time that the golden era of America was the 1950s and 1960s. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. Our economy was booming at the time, and we became the #1 economy in the world at that time. The tax rate for the highest bracket fluctuated between 70 and 91%. So that is when we were at our best. Now, I want to be clear. I'm also a businessman, and boy, that seems high. It does, okay? And one of the reasons my family were Republicans when I was growing up was because before Reagan came in, the highest marginal tax rate was 70%. So now we are nowhere near that. We have reduced taxes to bare bones, and we have shifted the taxes onto the middle class and away from the rich and corporations. So there is a much better balance to be had. And if you said to me, well, you're going to have $800 in taxes that are new, I say, wow, that hurts. But you're going to save $1,000 in premiums, deal. That is a deal I will take every time because I can do math. So that is the beginning of your answer to taxes. And then you said how much care. Well, so that is something that all the countries that do single payer or a version of single payer struggle with, and they have learned a lot of lessons. And if we stop saying, America's #1, we might actually just, first of all, on this issue, we're number 37. And if we looked at what Japan is doing so well, keeping costs down to half of ours and less, we might actually learn something from Japan, Switzerland, and other countries. And by the way, when we say Medicare for all, Medicare Advantage exists. So you can actually add private insurance on top of that, and I find that perfectly great. I have no problems with that at all. So that is the government making sure you don't die and actually lowering rates for you. And then if you want more insurance, no problem.
So all this sounds great, except for the fact that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security eat up 66% of the federal budget every single year. The idea that all of these socialized medicine countries have it so much better than we do, particularly in terms of cancer care, is a joke. We are still #1 in terms of 5-year cancer survival rate here in the United States. Marginal tax rates in the 1950s, there are a couple things that are worth noting. One, that was top individual marginal tax rates, not necessarily the business tax rate. We now have some of the highest corporate tax rates altogether in the industrialized world. And if you would prefer for us to destroy half of the world before we become the only country that didn't have its industrial capacity destroyed, which is what happened in the 1940s, leading to us being the only productive country on planet Earth, essentially, for the next few decades, I'm not with you there. I'm not really in favor of having a giant world war that destroys all of have the capacity to produce anything and just markets that we can provide to.
Right. So first of all, it is fair to say that of course the 1950s and 60s were different. We just come out of the war. So, but you have to consider all the different factors. So one was that factor, and the other factor that was the one I mentioned. So when Republicans and conservatives say, well, high taxes by definition will lead to slower growth, well, we know because of our experience in the 1950s and 60s that isn't true. Now you can say there are other factors, but you can't say that the highest marginal tax rate being 70 or even 90% slows down growth, because it didn't. And it wasn't in Japan and Switzerland, it was right here. And by the way, as a guy who grew up Republican, I was surprised by that too. I was surprised that Finland's system of non-competition in schools worked, but it does. So we have to be open to facts and understand. So, and on the issue of where we're good and not good in healthcare, sure, there are different areas where we excel. But Ben, honestly, you're cherry picking there at one particular area that we're good. Overall, we're number 37. That is not a good result.
Well, you have
so
to
if we're not dying from cancer, we're dying from other things. It's empirical. We are not as healthy. And finally, this idea that corporations are paying the highest tax rate is both, again, true and untrue. The part that is true is, hey, there's a rate of 35%. The part that's not true is they don't actually pay that. There is giant loopholes. And they've got $2 trillion sitting offshore, and they won't bring it in. And the reality is that if you look at the taxes from the 1950s, corporations used to pay about 1/3 of our taxes, about 33% of the taxes overall. So they did their fair share, and that is fair. I don't want them paying all of it, but I want them paying a reasonable amount. Now, the share that corporations pay of taxes is down to 10%. You see what they did there? They did wealth redistribution. They took your wealth and redistributed to them.
And then I'll be done with this because we can do healthcare for 8 hours here. But two things. One, I'd like to know which tax deduction, when people say tax loopholes, a tax loophole is just a tax deduction that's available to everyone, and some people take advantage of it and some people don't. I can't take advantage of certain corporate tax deductions because my business isn't in those businesses, for example. I'm sort of with you in the sense that I'm not in favor of tax deductions. I'm in favor of a lower tax rate and get rid of a lot of the tax deductions because I think that it's ridiculous that we have people gaming the system. That said, I'd like to know which tax deductions you'd like to do away with. And I'd like to know also when you say that corporations pay 10% of the taxes, right, and individuals pay the other 90%, okay, so that means the taxes are still getting paid to a higher rate than we ever have in our history in terms of the tax revenue to the government. The amount of tax revenue to the government right now is trillions of dollars every year. And final point here. You elided this question by saying we can learn stuff from Japan. The standard of care is the entire question when it comes to single-payer health care. That is the entire thing. If people felt like they were going to get the same access to care in a single-payer healthcare system as they did in a system where they can pay their own way, then we would have no controversy here. But the fact is that rationing is mandated as soon as you start having the government run the healthcare system and decide what level of care people get. So I don't want anyone deciding what level of care that I can get. I don't want anyone else, they don't care about me. They don't know my child's name, they don't know my name. All they know is how much I cost. I mean, Ezekiel Emanuel's at least honest about this. Ezekiel Emanuel comes out and says, listen, I want to die at 70, right? I want to die at 80. That's fine with me. I'd rather die at that, well, that's good for him. But if I don't want to die at 80, or I don't want my father to die at 80, it's none of his damn business.
So when you say tax revenue is at its highest point, now you know that that's misleading because everything economically is at its highest point, meaning that we have a lot more people in the country than we did in the 1950s and 60s, so hence we are collecting more overall taxes. But the reality is, as a percentage, it is clearly down. The top bracket now is around 39%. It used to be at 91%. That's inarguable, right?
But our economy is significantly larger than it was then, and part of that is because of reductions in taxes over previous decades.
Well, we tried supply-side economics. Hey, Kansas, how's that working out for you? So there's this myth that...
It's working out for you. Your business is doing great.
Okay, yeah. Well, we just had 8 years of Obama. So the tax rate is clearly lower for the richest people in the country. It is clearly lower for corporations, in effect. It is, and so to say that it's a record collection is misleading. So in terms of the healthcare and how that relates to the government, oh, by the way, on one more thing on taxes, you said, name me a tax loophole. Mm-hmm. So yes, there are plenty of those. For example, they hide their money offshore. They do tricks like the double Dutch and the Irish sandwich or the reverse. And I would end that. I would say, hey, you know what? We've got a 35% rate. Here's the new rule. You're going to pay 35%, okay? And you're not allowed to hide your money. I don't care if it's in the Cayman Islands. We're going to make that illegal, Mitt Romney. We're going to make it illegal, okay? And so then every once in a while they do a tax holiday. Well, that must be nice. You remember when you got a tax holiday? I don't remember getting a tax holiday. No, that's only for corporations who bribe politicians. So they brought that rate down from 35% to 5%. And they said they were going to create more jobs. Color me surprised when it turns out they didn't. They offshore taxes. They took that 30% extra, put it in their pocket, gave it to their executives, and created no new jobs. Because that's how it works if you just trust corporations to do the right thing. Corporations are not evil. They just want to maximize profit. That is what they're built for. So please don't be naive and be like, no, but the corporations will look out for our interests. No, they look out for their bottom line. And finally, just last quick thing, Medicare Advantage. You keep saying rationing healthcare. But Medicare gives you the bare minimum, and people seem to be very, very happy about it given how well it polls. But you can do Medicare Advantage and get more. I want you to be able to do that. If you're incredibly rich and you want every kind of treatment, I don't want to deny that to you. Get Medicare Advantage.
So then let me just ask,
the problem is when you pay a higher tax rate throughout the course of your life to pay for all of the Medicare that you're talking about, you don't have enough money to pay for Medicare Advantage in many cases. And as far as this idea that corporations they don't have any of your interests at heart, you are a corporation. TYT's is a corporation. You have 80 employees. I assume that you're not just a greedy asshole, and that you actually would like to help your employees from time to time. And you just talked about how under Obama, everything got better with your business. Well, under Obama, he didn't radically escalate taxes. Okay, there was not a radical escalation of taxes under President Obama. And finally, when you seem to be identifying a higher tax rate in the 1950s with higher level of growth. So if that's the case, why not just tax everybody at 100%? We can have massive growth from here to eternity.
Do you think we'll see tax reform in the next few months here?
Okay, so let me try to address all that in your question as well. So just real quick, look guys, I said it however many questions ago, of course you have to find the right balance on all of these issues, including taxes. So I never said there's no end to how much you can
I'm just asking
pay.
why though.
Yeah, so the this leads to, wait a minute, this leads to big government versus small government. You're asking me what the ideal tax rate is, and then you did a straw man there for a second and said it should be 100%. I never said that.
No.
In fact, I said...
No, you said the economy...
Let me understand what you said.
You said the economy grew faster when the top marginal tax rate was 91%. So I'm asking you, why shouldn't the top tax rate or all tax rates be 91%? You seem to be identifying a higher rate of growth with higher taxation. So I'm asking you, on principle, you keep talking about the glories of a mixed economy. So now tell me about the glories of capital. I've heard about the glories of high tax rates. I've heard about the glories of government-provided health care. Now tell me some of the glories of actual capitalism, which is the basis for all the things you're talking. Tell me why it's good.
Right. So now, look, I use the example of the 91% and 70% to give you a sense of that I was surprised and you'd be surprised to find out that our economy was booming in those times. That's not to say that that is the right tax rate for us today. And so the exercise of finding the right tax rate is, guys, try to follow along, okay? It's called logic. So it would be preposterous to set the tax rate at 0. It would be preposterous to set it at 100%. So what we have to do as a society is figure out where we can maximize the most amount of good for the country.
Should be closer to 0 or closer to
the government, but not too much away from us. So, for example, the reason why when taxes are higher, it winds up being better for the economy is because it recirculates the money. So if you give it to the rich, this is hilarious. If you're uneducated, please at least don't make it obvious.
It's the most interesting conversation I've
If
ever
you
heard.
don't know the concept of recirculation of money, then go look it up. And so the way that it works is that when the middle class has more money, disposable income, they spend it. Why? Because they're not living in the lap of luxury. They're not saving it for their yacht. So they need to buy food for their family. They need education for their family. So they spend it and it goes back into the economy. If you just give it in supply side economics to the rich and hope that it trickles down on us eventually decades later, what they wind up doing with it is something that is logical. They save it. But that means it does not recirculate in the economy. And that is why when you have lower taxes, ironically, the economy does worse. But of course it's a balancing out.
Okay, so now you're making a strong case for Keynesian economics, which is totally fine, obviously. The problem with Keynesian economics is that it doesn't even work in theory, because again, once you go to the logical extreme, which is remove all of the money from the rich people who are saving all their money and give it to all the poor people to buy hamburgers, that doesn't help the economy or spur the economy. What spurs the economy is a higher level. What spurs the economy is the creation of new products and services, and that is only going to be done by people who have expendable capital to actually invest in new products and services that we all enjoy. This is what creates economic growth. It's also worth noting that this myth that spending is inherently better for an economy than saving, that's only true if you're talking about somebody who's actually taking the cash and just shoving it into their mattress. Banks are in the business of lending. When they take the money in, they don't just stick it in Al Gore's fake lockbox. They actually lend the money back out to people to actually create new businesses and new products. You had an investor, right? When you started TYT, you were given $4 million by Buddy Romer to start TYT. That's great. That's the way business should work, right? But that money it didn't come from a bunch of poor people buying hamburgers. It came from a very, very wealthy guy who gave you money to create a business a lot of people want to patronize. If you want better products and better services, you need more investment in the products and services. The basic name is trickle-down economics. Trickle-down economics is not something that any conservative even proposed. It's a leftist revision of what economics actually is, because you're not giving me the money. It was my money in the first place, created through voluntary transactions that I had with others. I've not stolen money from anyone, neither have you. And the idea that money has to be forcibly taken from you